What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com. And today I am super excited to be joined, finally, once again, by the Michael Darcy of KC Sports Report. As you guys know probably by now, unless you've been living under a rock or not paying attention to my channel, I was at basic training, so my video production was kind of slow. But I'm finally getting back into it, and I wanted to bring Michael back on to talk some Chiefs football again. So, Michael, tell us, what are you up to nowadays?
Well, first of all, Josh, it is fantastic to be back. And now you're doing big things in the world. You're in the Air Force. I just started as a transfer student at the University of Kansas, which I'm sure makes you very happy. So I've just been doing college stuff. As you can see, I got the Sports Radio 810 flag in the background. Still working at the radio station while I'm in college, but just trying to crank out content. And hopefully this Chiefs season, we can get a lot of stuff out combined too.
Absolutely. So the reason I brought you on today is because I wanted to talk about the Chiefs wide receiver core with you. So recently I wrote an article for ArrowheadAddict.com about the Chiefs potentially having one of the best value wide receiver cores in the entire NFL. So if you didn't know, the Kansas City Chiefs are bottom 5 in the entire NFL in what they're paying their receivers this year. So they're paying approximately $16 million for the group of Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Skyy Moore, and Mecole Hardman. Now, to put that into perspective, the Miami Dolphins alone, with Tyreek Hill's new contract extension, they'll be paying him $28 million in a single season. The Chiefs are paying much less than that for their entire wide receiver core, essentially. You could throw Justin Watson in there, I guess, if you wanted to, since he's the 5th receiver, but he's making next to nothing, so he doesn't really add to the number a whole lot. But, yeah, I mean, the Chiefs, they are not paying that much for their wide receiver group, yet I kind of feel like they have one of the better wide receiver groups in the league. They might not have a top 10 or top 5 stud receiver like they did when they had Tyreek Hill, but the depth just feels so much better. And I think a lot of people are also sleeping on Juju Smith-Schuster this year and the impact that he can have. But, I mean, I guess we'll kind of talk about all of them individually, but what are your initial thoughts on that information?
Well, first of all, that is really good information to know, and that's something that I wouldn't have thought to look up or probably would have found. I think that just kind of shows you how good Brett Veach did this offseason in handling trading one of the best pieces that they've ever had. I mean, Tyreek Hill has been a staple in Kansas City for a long time now, and I think that when Brett Veach came to that realization that it was time to let it go and time to get rid of him, that he was going to have to do a pretty good job of bringing in more talent to make sure that unit doesn't go away completely and is just a negative. And I think that, when you're looking at it, they don't have that guy that could go out there and get 1,500 receiving yards, but they have guys that from, I would say, 1 through 4 can easily go out there and get 750 to 1,000 receiving yards, and it overall makes the unit better. And I think that, the cost of them just goes to further show you how you can not only get better production and match production for less of a cost when you spread it out, instead of putting it all in one guy. I mean, we could have had the Tyreek Hill experience in Kansas City in 2023. It would have been really expensive. We probably would have been out on free agency for the next couple of years, and it probably would have hurt the team in the long run. But Brett Veach, being the savvy GM in which he is, traded away that really big piece and got pretty much undisputably, I would say, deeper at the position, and they might be a better overall unit than they've been in the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes era.
Yeah, I mean, you remember, I hated the move when it first happened. I think we all hated the move when it first happened because it's like, oh my gosh, how could they trade Tyreek freaking Hill?
Yeah.
And then we all kind of sat back and were like, well, they do have a lot of picks. And, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, they signed him. I mean, he's not Tyreek Hill, but he brings a speed element that you lost when you traded Tyreek Hill. And, Juju Smith-Schuster's here. Now, I would have really liked to have seen that 1 year of Tyreek Hill, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Travis Kelce, because that would have been really fun. That would have been damn near unstoppable. But it wasn't going to be sustainable long term, and they lucked out on getting Juju Smith-Schuster for the number that they did. And he's part of the reason why this Chiefs wide receiver core is one of the best values in football, is because he signed such a low risk deal. And honestly, the chemistry that it seems he's developed with Mahomes already warrants an extension, in my opinion. I know he hasn't played a game yet, but man, if you could lock up Juju Smith-Schuster long term, and realistically, him and his agent probably aren't going to want to sign any extension now, because the reason they signed that 1-year deal is so he can produce and maybe test the market again next year and get the best money possible. But if the Chiefs offer him a fair deal to extend him now, that would be awesome. And I actually wrote about that recently too, because I think a lot of people, at first they think, well, why would you extend him already? But it makes a lot of sense, especially when you take into account the fact that the only notable receivers that the Chiefs have under contract for next year are MVS and Skyy Moore. So to have another quality receiver, and I'm kind of getting ahead of everything here, but to have another quality receiver, under contract for the foreseeable future would be really ideal. I don't know your thoughts on that, but I'm glad they got Juju Smith-Schuster for the contract they did, and he's a big reason that it looks like such a great deal. But honestly, I would consider extending him as soon as possible.
Well, when you think about it logically, this would be the best place for Juju Smith-Schuster to build his career. He's got the best quarterback on the planet, someone that is always going to put up stats. And the major question for Juju is, does he want to be a part of that culture and be a part of the winning in Kansas City? And I think that if he wants to win and he wants to put up stats, Kansas City would be the best place to do it. And I think that Tyreek Hill is kind of he found that out while he was here, because, obviously when he was under Alex Smith, he wasn't putting up these kind of numbers. But I think I heard actually on the radio today that he put up over 400 more yards per season under Mahomes than he did under Alex Smith, which just kind of goes to show you that the discrepancy between, I guess Patrick Mahomes and Alex Smith was that great, but Patrick Mahomes is up here and Alex Smith, I'd say, is middle of the pack. And there's a lot of quarterbacks out there that are middle of the pack. And Juju's coming from a environment that had Ben Roethlisberger, who could barely throw the ball 15 yards in the air.
He was worse than middle of the pack, that's for sure.
Yeah, no. Ben Roethlisberger was the guy that kind of held everybody up at the end. Like, he was really, really bad. And I think that, Juju wasn't even bad under the Steelers. He just didn't really get enough opportunity to shine in the later seasons because he got hurt and whatnot. But with Patrick Mahomes, this is going to be his best opportunity to put up a lot of stats. My only fear, and it would probably be a smart reason to sign him now rather than waiting, is if he comes out this season with Patrick Mahomes and puts up 1,200 receiving yards, he might get $25 million a year next year. I don't know. The way the wide receiver market has just exploded, Christian Kirk getting paid what he did, and just it keeps getting bigger. I hope that he has a good season, but I almost hope it's not so good to the point that you can't bring him back.
You've started a really good dialogue because, Juju Smith-Schuster, I think there's a lot of people that still kind of doubt him and a lot of people that are underrating him. When you're right, Ben Roethlisberger, his quarterback play was so bad that it was really hard for Juju Smith-Schuster to do anything. And I know that was one of the big concerns about him. And then the other one being, he can't produce as a wide receiver one. Well, even though he's our wide receiver one technically in Kansas City, or at least I think most people can agree that Juju Smith-Schuster is the wide receiver one, he still is technically in the hierarchy of Chiefs pass catchers under Travis Kelce. So he's not being asked to be the number one guy still. He's still the number two guy. He's just the number one receiver. So I think that alone is a good reason for people to believe that he will have another one of those big years like he had early on in Pittsburgh. And also Ben Roethlisberger, like I said, he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league his last couple of years there. Now, I applaud Juju Smith-Schuster for being loyal, but it seems like he did really want to be in Kansas City. And now that he's finally here, he's just really – he seems happier here to me than he did in Pittsburgh at the end. Again, I applaud him for being loyal, but you can tell that he wanted to be here. And you can tell Patrick Mahomes wanted him here too. But anyway, Ben Roethlisberger, he was bottom 5 in yards per attempt in his final year there in Pittsburgh. I don't remember where he was in that bottom 5, but I know he was squarely in the bottom 5 of yards per attempt. And what do you know? Juju Smith-Schuster, every single year in Pittsburgh, you want to know what a big stat of his that declined? Yards per reception. And I think that is directly correlated to the quarterback not being able to get him the ball because Ben, his arm, just there was nothing left.
Yeah, I mean, it was very clear, not only in that playoff game, just that final season, really the past couple seasons, he just could not throw the ball downfield effectively. Like you said, Juju Smith-Schuster's loyalty is something to applaud, but at a certain point, Ben was kind of hurting his career and kind of stunting his growth. And I think that now he's here, it's going to give him an opportunity to just really explode onto the scene. You talked about how he is kind of the de facto number one wide receiver. I don't even know if I want to call him our number one wide receiver. I mean, he probably is on paper, but I feel like the Chiefs just don't have that definitive one. And I mean, maybe this is a hot take, but if Skyy Moore is as good as I think that he could be, I think he might be the number one wide receiver by the end of this year. Like, I think he's got all the talent. His release is so damn quick, really good hands. I think that if he has that connection with Mahomes, especially because we've got him under contract for 4 years and not just one like Juju, I think Skyy Moore could be that guy that bursts onto the scene and has a really good rookie season.
Well, if you're right, that would be best case scenario for the Chiefs. And I'm glad you brought up Skyy Moore because I was probably going to go there next. But I'm excited for him this year, but I was kind of unsure where you were at with expectations regarding him because I think he'll be good and he's going to contribute for sure, but I wasn't sure just how much. Do you have a wide receiver one ceiling on him in year one?
No, not at all. I think that if he puts up 600 receiving yards this season, I'd be very happy. I think 600 yards receiving, let's say 3 or 4 touchdowns. I know that might be a little bit low, but I just think for a rookie in Andy Reid's offense, you can't have these crazy expectations because in reality, he's probably not going to meet them just because Chiefs fans always have their standards up to here. And usually the player's decent or just a little bit below that. But since he doesn't reach their expectations, they get upset. I think if Skyy Moore comes in and plays a pretty good amount of the snaps and has 650 to 700 receiving yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns, I think that's a really good rookie campaign. I really do.
Yeah. And I have to ask you though, actually, I don't want the video to go in a negative direction, but as much as I love the Skyy Moore pick, after watching George Pickens this preseason, are you kind of scared that maybe the Chiefs passed up on George Pickens and it's going to come back to bite them?
That's a really good question because the Chiefs have a history of making the wrong decision when it comes to wide receiver and specifically second round wide receivers, which knock on wood. But, I think George Pickens looks as good as he does for 2 reasons. One, because he's in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh just has a knack of getting their wide receivers in the draft and just kind of finding that right guy. And I also think that, he's just a very talented wide receiver. I think, and I don't know if this is a great thing to say, I do think I wouldn't be surprised if a year and a half from now or at some point in the future, we see him get into some off the field issues and he ends up getting cut or he's not playing a lot of the time because he's dealing with stuff off the field. That's just kind of what I saw. I mean, he's a really physical dude. You can kind of.
I have heard that a lot. If he does keep it all together, I wonder if it's going to be one of those picks we look at and go, you know what, Skyy Moore is good, but man, George Pickens, they could have had him. I just don't want that to happen.
Me too. Which I hope that George Pickens isn't in any off the field issues. I want to see what he can do. But I think another thing to look at, and I know that we are comparing, well, these are interesting cases. I think that it's going to come down to the George Pickens versus Skyy Moore debate. I don't really care about what the Packers did with Christian Watson or who the Patriots drafted the Baylor kid. I don't even know his name, to be honest with you. But
Tyquan Thornton.
yeah, he's probably going to suck. I hate to be that guy, but it's in the Patriots. I mean,
Well, especially year one, because he broke I forget which bone. He broke a bone. He's going to be out like the first 8 weeks of the year. So he's not even going to be a factor, it doesn't seem like.
And I don't trust the Patriots when it comes to drafting wide receivers. But I think that, when you look at that debate, and it's not really a debate yet because they haven't done anything, but I think that Patrick Mahomes or Mitchell Trubisky or the rookie,
Kenny Pickett.
Kenny Pickett, yeah. So I think when you have those quarterbacks, I think that, well, really, if Kenny Pickett or Mitchell Trubisky has George Pickens playing at a better level, we might be kind of wary about how good the Pat Skyy Moore connection really is.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want the conversation to go there, but I had to ask you that because I've seen Pickens in his preseason highlights. But I still think Skyy Moore is going to be really good. And a couple things I like about him: one, you mentioned it, his release, and two, he has really, really good hands, which, the Chiefs have had some wide receivers whose hands aren't the most dependable in recent years. Let's just be honest. And Skyy Moore, he has big hands and he has strong hands. And I'll tell you what, when he catches the ball, and he is not letting it go. So that's another thing I really like about him. And I think his ability to get open too is very underrated, and it's going to help him be a good player for a long time. But next I wanted to talk about Marquez Valdes-Scantling, because I kind of see him as the Demarcus Robinson replacement. And if that's truly what it is. Now, I know they signed him right after Tyreek Hill, and a lot of people were like, oh, he's the Tyreek Hill replacement. Well, not necessarily, but he's a receiver that can help.
Yeah.
I see him more as the Demarcus Robinson replacement. If that's the case, Veach hit it out of the park with Demarcus Robinson's replacement. Not that MVS is this fantastic receiver, but he is good enough. He's got good speed. He can take the top off the defense. And he had some productive years for the Packers. I like that signing.
Yeah, I think that the Tyreek Hill MVS kind of comparison just kind of goes to their play styles. I don't think that – I think that's comparable because MVS is going to be a guy that, like you said, is going to take the top off and is mostly going to be used deep down the field, where Demarcus Robinson really wasn't a guy that you just said, well, he never ran forward, so usually he was running backwards somewhere. But I think that MVS is going to be kind of that, not comparing him to Tyreek Hill, but he's going to have that role where Mahomes just says, go deep and go get open downfield. And I think a couple times this season, really early on, we're going to see Mahomes just fire it downfield really deep, and he's going to hit MVS, and it's going to make these defenses actually respect MVS, because I don't think that NFL defenses have this fear of the Chiefs throwing it deep anymore. I really don't, because Tyreek Hill was that guy. So the Chiefs are going to have to make opposing teams respect the deep threat, and I think that MVS is going to be really good in that role.
Yeah, I really like what you said there, because it does seem like that the league is kind of counting out the Chiefs a little bit since they don't have Tyreek Hill anymore, but they're also kind of ignoring that they improved in just about every other area. And that includes receivers, because their depth got so much better. And MVS is definitely a guy. There was some stat about plays of 20 yards or more, and MVS was right up there with Tyreek Hill when it comes to big plays. And also, people were concerned about MVS's drops. He did struggle with drops early on in his career, but from what I understand, he had 0 drops last year. So he did clean that up.
Not trying to bash Tyreek Hill either, because he's been bashed enough, but guy really couldn't catch the football a lot last year. So I hate to be that guy, but if MVS doesn't have an absurd amount, I don't think that's going to be a problem.
No, it shouldn't be. And MVS is another guy who has played with an elite quarterback before, which I think is actually important, because sometimes you get guys who haven't played with a quarterback before, because we know Mahomes likes to go off script a lot and stuff like that. And I know Aaron Rodgers does the same thing a lot too. And it takes a certain kind of guy to understand that and have that sort of chemistry. And MBS understands that because he played with Aaron Rodgers. And it should be a relatively smooth transition now coming to Patrick Mahomes as well. Because I think I remember a quote from training camp, and Skyy Moore was talking about how he had to adjust to that. Like, oh, even though you have your designed route that you're supposed to run, but you can't quit after that. And I know that wasn't the exact quote, but it was something along those lines. And Skyy Moore was learning quickly that the play is never over with Mahomes, and I think that's important.
I also think that when you play with a really high caliber quarterback, there's a different standard. Like you get used to being expected more of. You know what I mean? Like there's a standard of excellence that, if you're playing with Jared Goff in Detroit, you might not have this expectation to be great. I mean, I know that sounds bad, but Jared Goff is not going to demand out of his players what Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers does. So I think that, coming from that background, he knows what it takes to play for a great and an all-time great. And I think that transition isn't as big as maybe Skyy Moore coming from his college QB, which I don't even know who that was, to one of the best in the pros right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to talk about Mecole Hardman, though, just, touching on all the receivers. And Mecole Hardman is one of the most interesting case studies of the Chiefs because every year is supposedly his annual breakout season. And people are saying it again. He's going to have a breakout year, Mecole Hardman. Now, I don't necessarily believe that. But I do think Mecole is still a weapon for this team. I think people are even counting him out a little bit, especially since the Chiefs brought in so many new guys. Mecole isn't the shiny new toy anymore. People kind of got sick of him last year, including me. He did kind of redeem himself during the postseason, though, and he definitely seemed to, really grow into his new role. Because a lot of the times it seemed like the Chiefs were trying to make him something that he's not and force him the ball and everything like that. And the outcome just was not good. He was dropping passes and he couldn't be trusted. He really became strictly a gadget guy. And that's okay if he is a gadget guy too. I mean, he might always be a gadget guy, which there's nothing wrong with that, especially with the depth that the Chiefs have now brought in. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't think Mecole is going to have a breakout year like everyone says. I think he more so is what he is, but that's not a bad thing because I still think that he has a role in this team and he's that guy that can, break off a big play at any moment. He's an explosive threat. So, I mean, he has a place on this team, and I think people kind of forget about him a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, to go off your point, Mecole Hardman is like Clyde in a sense that Chiefs fans just think that he's going to emerge into some star out of nowhere. And I know that's probably not, maybe it's a little too harsh, but I don't think Mecole Hardman's going to have this breakout season for a couple reasons. One, I think that if he couldn't do it last year with really only Demarcus Robinson ahead of him, other than Tyreek Hill, what makes you think he's going to do it with Skyy Moore, Juju, and MVS all ahead of him, essentially? And I think that also, you talked about him being a gadget guy. I think if he's a gadget guy, the Chiefs should notice this, and they know this, but they should do everything in their power to only give him the ball in space, only give him those bubble screens, only get him in an opportunity where he can flourish and be really, really good, because there was a handful of plays last year where when he got the ball in space and had blocking in front of him, he was going at least 50 yards downfield. Like, that is what the Chiefs need. And if they can find a way to, I don't want to say limit him to that role, but every time that they need that done, or anytime they want to go to Mecole Hardman, they can go to him in that way. The offense is going to be better because they're picking up on, I don't want to say one of his few strengths, but one of the things that he does better than most people on this team.
Well, the frustrating thing was there were times last year where he seemed unplayable just because he couldn't do anything beyond the line of scrimmage. A lot of his production came from behind the line of scrimmage and manufactured touches. But when they asked him to catch that short pass on 3rd and 2, he drops it. And it's that kind of stuff that really, made me disappointed in Mecole. If he can clean that up even a little bit this year, that's going to be a huge win. And, none of this is to say he can't still be a guy that can become a reliable receiver, or someone that can be trusted to move the chains in a pinch, because that's kind of what he failed at last year. He was always someone that was capable of breaking off a long touchdown run, or a bubble screen, as you said, or a jet sweep or whatever. And you know what? If he doesn't improve from that, that's okay. You can take that loss. And if he does, by some miracle have his breakout year, well, that's just gravy, because that would just mean this Chiefs receiver core is one of the best in the league. I don't think that'll happen, but if it did, that would be amazing. But overall, Mecole Hardman, I think he kind of is what he is, but that's not a bad thing. And the Chiefs can afford that to be the case because they brought in so much depth this offseason. I mean, it's a nice change from the days that we had last season, like after the Chargers game, where it just became clear, the first Chargers game, by the way, where they lost, it just became clear, like, yo, they do not have enough. Byron Pringle, nice story, not a number 2 receiver. Mecole Hardman, he isn't taking that step. And then they went out and signed Josh Gordon in a desperation move. And, I like the effort of signing Josh Gordon and Veach trying something new, but it didn't work. And now this time, they really did their best in addressing the receiver position, and I think it's going to pay off. And as we said at the beginning of the video, I think the Chiefs have one of the best value wide receiver cores in football, because, I see some of the other teams too that are down in the bottom 5 where the Chiefs are and what they're paying the receiver. Some of the other teams out there, the Bears, the Ravens, these are teams that aren't paying their wide receivers a ton, but also their receivers kind of suck. The Chiefs don't. They have a really good receiver group, in my opinion. I mean, heck, like I said, I mentioned the Ravens in that list. The Ravens fans are excited about Demarcus Robinson, Michael. What the hell? Could you imagine if that was us?
The problem is it was us like 2 years ago. we were those people. And I think that they're going to find out very early on that Demarcus Robinson brings nothing but sadness and heartbreak to your team. I hate to be that guy, but he's going to start running. He's going to run the wrong route. He's going to run backwards. He's going to, you know what? He might have a couple plays where it's like, oh, he might be something, and he's just never going to amount to being anything. I think it really shows a lot that, once the Chiefs cut him, I guess they didn't cut him. Once the Chiefs just decided to not bring him back and the Raiders cut him this offseason, that he goes to the Ravens, a team that is really bad, especially in the wide receiver room. And he's what? Their second option? Their third option behind Mark Andrews? Like, that's really, really bad. And really quickly, to go back to the Mecole Hardman point, I think that he's got every reason to be good this season. If he has a good season, he's getting paid $20 million a season. I mean, like I said this in my video, or maybe I said it here, with Christian Kirk, if Mecole Hardman, who has already had, I think he had 1,000-yard season last year, it was like just barely over. If he doesn't,
he had like Mecole, I think he had like 700, but
okay.
He came on at the end of the year though.
Oh yeah, I mean, if he does that again, he's a consistent 700 to 1,000-yard wide receiver, and he's somebody that someone's going to pay for. Like,
well,
here's us.
Well, and yeah, here's the thing, because like you're right. Even though you might have been wrong about Mecole's stats or whatever, Christian Kirk, he was not a guy that had like multiple 1,000-yard seasons, and he still got absolutely paid. So Mecole, he could get paid by somebody, absolutely.
Now I'm going to look that up, because I thought he just barely cracked 1,000.
Yeah, no, not last year. I want to say he had 600 or 700 yards.
Yeah, that's bad. He had less than 700. He had 693.
Yeah, so
yikes,
not a huge year. But no, going back to Demarcus Robinson real quick too. The fact that, because he, in some games, he was getting the second most snaps among the wide receivers besides Tyreek Hill. And to think that that guy now got cut by another NFL team and is now a desperation signing by another just goes to show that the Chiefs held on to some of these guys for way too long and should have addressed receiver, long before they depended on Demarcus Robinson. And that goes for multiple positions on this team too, not just wide receiver. We saw it at linebacker. Defensive line, secondary. It's like there's too many guys where like they needed to move on from, and they really cleaned house this offseason, and it was such a relief. to see. I mean, like, thank you for a lot of these guys like Dan Sorensen, Demarcus Robinson. It was like, thank you for your time as a Chief, but you need to go.
I wonder who the decision came down to. Like, was it Andy that said, all right, you guys got to go? Or was it Brett Veach that said, hey, guys?
I think it was Veach because I think you can always tell those guys were Andy and Spags guys because Veach was bringing in talent through the draft that the coaches were refusing not to use. Like Dorian O'Daniel was one of them that, you know, like we always wanted to see him, but the coaches would just never play him. Armani Watts as well. Like those were guys Veach brought in to help. And it's like, hey, you guys aren't using my players that I brought in. And I think Veach definitely took control a little bit of the personnel this offseason. I mean, not to say that Reed and Spags and the coaches weren't involved because they always are, especially Andy Reid. Now, he has probably the most pull in the organization. But I do think Veach stepped in and was like, hey, you know what? I'm done with Dan Sorensen. You guys told me to bring him back last year. No, I can't. Like, I said it on a video, I think, with you and Lucas last year, and it might have been after that Chargers game as well. But I was like, do you think Brett Veach, because Brett Veach watches all the games. He's at all the games. He sits in the press box or whatever. Do you honestly think Brett Veach thinks Dan Sorensen is a good football player? There's no way. There's no way. I think that's the coach's favoritism. So I definitely think a lot of the movement we saw this offseason was because of Brett Veach stepping in. That's my honest belief.
And that someone needed to do it because I think that if what we are saying or what we believe comes true, he's going to look like the genius because he made these tough decisions and said, hey, guys, these are fan favorites. I know. I mean, I guess Dan Sorensen was a fan favorite and Demarcus Robinson and all these guys that have been with the organization for so long, they are not good enough to have a spot on this roster. And I mean, if you take those guys out, that's what, 3, 4, 5 roster spots, including Ben Neiman and all those guys you let walk away. I mean, who knows what those 5 players could do and if Brett Veach was the guy to fill those spots, I mean, have you seen the guys that he brought in over the past few off seasons and in the draft and how those guys have worked out? Like, I think that the moves that were made this offseason have only benefited the team and really don't have that many negatives.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of moves they made this offseason that, like, I didn't like. Probably the only one was bringing Frank Clark back, but that was offset by them bringing in Carlos Dunlap anyway, who I think is better. So, I mean, I'm happy with just about everything.
Really quickly, Josh, I want to ask you a question because, you know, I talked about this, I think, a couple months ago because people are like, oh, Frank Clark revenge season, blah, 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 blah. I'm not as big of a Frank Clark hater as you are. Don't like the guy. As someone who has, like, been like a heavy individual and someone who has lost quite a bit of weight and someone who like works out consistently and trying to get stronger and whatnot. Frank Clark losing weight by cutting out alcohol, great. I mean, fantastic. But at the defensive end group, is losing weight a good thing? Like, sure, you might get faster, but I don't think that he got stronger by any means. And, you know, I don't know. I don't see how that helps him. I really don't.
I actually think it does help. And here's why. Frank Clark, he was slow. Like he was slow off the ball. He was very and I mean, his earlier seasons in the NFL, he never seemed to be that slow. And it was very disappointing. And that's why I always thought the Chiefs needed to add more athleticism to the pass rush and more of a speed rush, which is also why I didn't totally approve of the Karlaftis pick at first, because I was early wanting them to bring in a speed rusher. But the problem with Frank Clark is that he was very slow. And if you're slow, then you got to win with power. Well, Frank Clark wasn't winning with power either. I mean, he couldn't do anything. Him losing weight, I think, and becoming more lean, ideally should make him more explosive and a little bit faster, and he should hopefully give tackles more trouble this year. I think this is a good thing for him. And you know what? Here's the thing. Frank Clark might still not do anything, and I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. But whatever he was doing the past few years clearly wasn't working. So the fact that he is showing the effort, or at least it looks like he's putting in the effort to be a more productive player this offseason, you know what? I'm all for it. I expect absolutely nothing from Frank Clark this year because he's given you no reason that we should expect anything from him. But you know what? If he produces, that's great. That's awesome. But it doesn't matter if he doesn't because we also brought in Dunlap and Karlaftis. So that's why bringing back Frank Clark isn't as bad of a move as I viewed it, a few months ago because it seemed like that's all they were going to do for a while. And I was like, I don't really trust that because it seemed like Clark and Karlaftis was only maybe a slight upgrade over Melvin Ingram and Frank Clark from last year. So, yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I do think him losing weight helps him because whatever he was doing the past few years wasn't working.
Yeah, I hope it does. I just worry that, he might be leaner and he might be faster, but with you losing weight, you do lose strength to an extent. And I never really saw him as a guy that was just strong coming off the edge. Maybe his speed will be enough to get by a few tackles, but I just worry that, he might be faster, but guess what? He's also lighter and easier to throw around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand the concern, but I mean, we've seen lighter edges in this league have success, so I'm willing to try it out and see if it works. And Frank Clark, like I said, he was slow off the ball for the past few years, and I'm down for him trying this because we so badly need something from Frank Clark. Like we need him to do something. And I mean, Andy Reid even pulled him to the side this offseason, which I thought was an interesting story. Yeah. Andy Reid had a heart-to-heart with him and was like, Frank, you suck. And I think Frank took that personally, and that's why he's put in all this work to transform his body and all that stuff. And you know what? I hope it works out because the Chiefs kind of need it to work out.
Yeah, but like you said, I mean, I have no expectations. I don't expect him to do anything, but just if he does do something, it's a bonus. But I think that, I'm just a little bit worried that he might be a little too light. But like I said, if he does anything this season, it's a bonus.
Yeah, well, I've heard people say that now that he's lost weight too, like that could make him less of a factor as a run defender. Well, it's not. Frank Clark wasn't a fantastic run defender as it was, and pass rush is the much more valuable asset. If this makes him lesser of a run defender and more of a pass rusher, you know what? I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, like setting the edge is great and all, but having a defensive end in this NFL that primarily sets the edge and stops the run isn't really a valuable defensive end, I would argue, because I mean, with how good these quarterbacks are.
Well, with how much he was getting paid, it was just his contract as an albatross.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if Tano Passanio was elite at setting the edge, it would kind of just make sense. But when you're paying Frank Clark $100 million, you expect him to get 15 sacks a year, and he wasn't doing that, and he probably will never do that. But, wouldn't it be the most Frank Clark thing ever to have like a breakout season and he goes somewhere else and get paid again?
Yeah, it would be the Chiefs thing to happen, not the Frank Clark thing to happen, but the Chiefs thing to happen because you know how I feel about Frank Clark. But this video is about to go off the rails because
I was gonna say we've talked about Clyde. Or do we? No, we haven't talked about Clyde yet.
Not in this one. We did it in your video, but not.
There is time, but we have talked about Frank.
Well, you know what? Let's do it. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I predict, will lose his starting job by week 8.
Who does he lose it to?
To be determined.
Okay,
but
that's fair.
I think he'll lose his job because or you'll slowly start. I'm not saying Clyde will get benched or whatever, and like he'll just like he won't see the field. But I think the other guys will eat into his snaps enough to where he's not considered the number one anymore.
I mean, I feel like we're gonna get to a point where we just have a running back. I mean, we kind of already do have a running back committee, but there just isn't that number one guy. I think that honestly, if Pacheco does shine when he does play, he might get the edge over Clyde. I saw something very interesting in training camp from Eric Bieniemy, kind of talking about how he was worried about Clyde's like stamina. And that really kind of caught me off guard because I never really pictured Clyde out of football shape, really. And I think that him being not in football shape could really kind of lose favor with the coaches, and he might lose his starting job a lot sooner than a lot of Chiefs fans think. But I think we talked about this in my video. I mean, you're going to get Chiefs fans calling for him to be benched in week 2. Like, it's going to be right away because he's just one of those guys that if he's not the best running back in football, he's going to get criticism. You know what I mean? And I'm not sticking up for Clyde. He's been mediocre, but I'm also not the guy leading the charge with pitchforks and flames just saying we got to get rid of him right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, you saw in the postseason last year, he was much better as a complimentary guy behind Jerick McKinnon. That's a better role for him when he's a change of pace, not the number one, because he's not that explosive threat. And I always refer to this chart, and if I could put it on the screen right now, I would so fans could see it, but maybe I'll link it in the description if you guys are interested in seeing it. But it basically showed, or it was the yards over expected for running backs last year. And basically it showed how well the offensive line was blocking and how well the running backs were running. And despite Clyde Edwards-Helaire having the best run blocking in the entire NFL, he was doing absolutely nothing. He had and there was another chart too, and it also showed the Chiefs had the best run blocking, but it showed that the Chiefs had the worst yards from their running backs after contact, which means basically the Chiefs are creating all these big holes, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire was getting a lot of yards before contact, but he was not getting any yards after contact. He's going down at first contact a lot. Just a waste of the holes that the Chiefs offensive line was creating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was even something that we were praising Clyde for, like last season, his ability to keep going after the initial hit, but he hasn't really.
It just hasn't been the case.
Yeah. Honestly, if Clyde was like a 3rd round draft pick, we'd never really talk about him like this. But since we spent a 1st round asset to get this guy, and he hasn't been bad necessarily. I would just say he's been very average to slightly below average.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
He's not been worth the return of the investment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think you summed it up perfectly. We hit all the points I wanted to hit in this video. The wide receiver room, Frank Clark and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because it wouldn't be a video with us without talking about those things. So
we might just have to create like a YouTube channel called Michael Darcy and Josh Fan discuss Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Frank Clark, because that's just what we're talking about.
Yeah, and that'll be the actual title of the channel. Josh Fan and Michael Darcy talk about Frank Clark and Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yes.
No, but that's all I got for this video, Michael. We're running 42 minutes now, and I know you still got to get home. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. But before I do, tell the people where they can find you.
Absolutely, Josh. It was a pleasure to get back on your channel. Guys, we're going to be doing this all Chiefs season long.
Yes.
Hopefully getting more content out for you guys. Hopefully we can get Lucas Murphy, a.k.a. the Beat of Kansas City.
Yes, shout out Lucas.
Yeah, Lucas has been killing it, man. He's been dropping some weight. He's still trying to do the KU writing, and I know Josh is a big KU fan, so that makes him happy.
No. In fact, we gotta talk about that. We're gonna do a video talking about that.
For sure. But you guys can follow me on Instagram. That is KC_Sports Report. Twitter is @KC Sports Report. You guys can obviously find me on YouTube. That is just KC Sports Report. And yeah, Josh, it's been a pleasure, and I really love coming on here.
All right. Well, sounds good. There you guys have it. So with all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this. And make sure you check out my work at showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com. And we will see you all in the next one.